Well, I think the first one is a book from Rene Descartes. So the French mathematician and philosopher is called the Discourse on the Method. So basically, it's a book where Rene Descartes uses the famous expression cogito ergo sum, which means basically I think, therefore I exist. And I think in this book, Descartes tackles the problem of skepticism, and he starts his line of reasoning by doubting everything. So to assess the world from a fresh perspective, clear of any, I would say, cliché or preconceived notions. So I think it's as a startup, you need to break some rules, and to also you need, of course, to learn from large companies and the way they work. At the same time, you need to differentiate yourselves and to be able to challenge challenge the status quo. And I think the scientific method of Descartes is very powerful, of course, for scientists, but also for entrepreneurs, because they will need at some point in time to break some existing rules, to get rid of some conventions that had a meaning 50 years ago or a century ago, but the meaning has been completely lost.
Today's episode is brought to you by Exige International. Exige is an executive search and recruitment training business that Fiona and myself have been working on for the last 19 years. We provide technology and innovation-focused executives to the insurance and wider financial services sector, with a focus on the UK and Swiss markets. If you have a search, or you'd like to discuss improving your recruitment and interviewing process, please visit our website, Exige International. Exige is spelled E-X-I-G-E. And tell the team William sent you. I'm also very happy to introduce our new sponsor, Crankhouse Coffee. Crankhouse Coffee is run by Dave Stanton, producing some of the UK's most exciting coffees, available for dispatch all over Europe. With a host of single origin and hard-to-find coffee, expertly roasted with care and attention, Crankhouse Coffee is a true gem of a business. I've been drinking this coffee for years, and I am thoroughly happy to have them as a sponsor of the show. So just head over to crankhousecoffee.co.uk, that's crankhousecoffee.co.uk, and you can use the code William to receive a special discount. In today's episode, I interview Tanguy Touffut, CEO and co-founder of insurtech Descartes Underwriting. I'm really happy to bring you this conversation because Descartes are known for their innovative work on weather-based parametric modeling. And having just closed their Series A for $18.5 million, I thought it would be a perfect time to speak with Tanguy. Tanguy has interesting thoughts on insurance's role in combating climate change, something that's close to my heart, and also on how to use culture to not only attract talent, but how to keep them together. So there's lots of topics here which were in my wheelhouse. I hope you're going to enjoy this conversation. So without further ado, I give you Tanguy Touffut. Tanguy Touffut, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good. Thank you, William.
Why do you think insurance can have a positive effect on the world?
Well, I think practically insurance has two positive effects on the world. The first one is really protecting populations and companies against adverse events, but also a big positive impact of the insurance sector on the world is through the financing of the economy. Typically, compared to banks, the role is even larger in the sense that it finances the future through long-term investments. So I think it's something that is very positive. If we come back to the first positive effect, insurance is clearly at the forefront of the fight against climate change. So we cannot stop climate change alone, but insurers support governments and enterprises to in mitigating the risks and planning for the future.
What are your thoughts on insurance being more of the stick in the process? And what I mean by that is that, you wouldn't get insured to drive a car if you had a history of driving drunk, right? But if you're a company that has a history of burning coal, of dumping plastic in the ocean, of cutting down prime forest, yet you're looking for your factories to be covered for adverse weather, flooding, should there be a premium on those organizations? And should insurance be saying, look, you have to be demonstrating to us that you are carbon neutralizing, you are moving towards a net zero, otherwise you just can't have an insurance policy. What are your thoughts on that type of reasonable, or maybe unreasonable types of requirements on clients?
I think today it's quite clear that insurers should support the transition to renewable energy. And I mentioned that insurance has two positive effects, both on the, I would say, the protection side and on the financing side. So many large insurers have already stopped investing in coal-driven businesses, but they also have to stop insuring, I would say, dirty businesses. And it's more or less the case for European insurers. It's starting also for US insurers. So they are definitely changing their underwriting strategy. And I think we need to be very strict in terms of not insuring, I would say, coal factories, for instance, or companies with potential reputational risks. And in our case, within Descartes Underwriting, it's definitely something that's we really emphasize. And in many cases, in some countries, so typically for some Eastern European countries or for China, we are struggling to grow there just because we won't be able to comply with our internal policies. But definitely, we should not make any concession about that. I think it's quite crucial to, I would say, be aligned with our values and to make sure that we will also keep on attracting the right profiles in the team. We have to be consistent with basically the fact that we want to do something against climate change. So we can't have I would say, a business speech and a communication speech. Both of them should be well aligned, which is definitely, very crucial. And it's not. I know that some companies are greenwashing their communication a bit too much. In our case, we don't want that to happen. So we want to be consistent.
Well, let's explore there for a moment with you, okay? Because I think there's always some really important parts. I mean, tell me about Descartes. What do you guys believe? You said internal policies, so let's explore that. I mean, do you guys have rules on this, and do you have rules on the types of companies you'll work with? Please tell us about that.
So basically, there are plenty of blacklisted companies we cannot work with, and it's usually related to their emissions. It's the criteria number one. Of course, there are plenty of other criteria, but CO2 emissions are definitely the most crucial part. Then we may have a few exceptions. Typically, if we insure wind farms, or if we insure, for example, solar farms for a business that will be heavily exposed to coal, it's fine, because actually we are supporting them in the transition to renewable energy. So what we want to consider is not only the company; it's also what would be what type of assets will be insured within the company. So it's I know that some other players will say we won't insure even wind farms or solar farms because it's a company that is blacklisted. In our case, we want to be pragmatic. If the company is making lots of efforts to actually invest in renewable energy, we should definitely help them achieve that goal, and it makes sense to be a partner. But it will be really on a case-by-case basis.
And how does that connect to your team? Because you talked about, we can't have an internal message and then have a different external one. Do you feel, as a CEO trying to attract talent in a market like insurance, that where you have maybe actuaries who are seriously risk averse anyway, you have underwriters who are in huge demand, you have other talent coming from other areas which are all going to be competed for. Does this matter? Does this matter to people when you're hiring them, these types of values you have as a business?
Definitely. I think one of the reasons is that we have, for example, PhDs in metallurgy in the team. We are actually working on weather data or climate data on a daily basis. It creates some anxiety because we see that climate change is not only about an increase in temperature. It's many bad things happening at the same time. We are breaking records every week. So this week, for example, in Canada, there was also a temperature record. So it was above 20 degrees Celsius in Montreal. So we see that the world is in a poor shape. So we cannot work on such data and at the same time contributing to the situation. So it's completely schizophrenic to do that. So of course, when we recruit people having a strong analytical background in methodology, we will make sure that the company is clean and is trying to do something against climate change. Again, we won't be able to stop climate change, but we can at least provide some solutions to mitigate the consequences of climate change.
And so I can hear in there that it's, as a meteorologist, you're effectively seeing these new records being set each day. And these aren't, great records. These are things which are massively concerning for the whole world. And so ultimately these people are like the first responders. You're going to see the accidents taking place, and thus you're going to want to try and stop them if you can. Is that something then you build into your why as a company? Are you finding that your team are responding with they want to do more? How are you finding that tension, that connection with the purpose of the business, the purpose of the people starting to come together and affect the direction?
I think it's one of the two purposes we have within Descartes Underwriting. I think it's good to tackle one of the greatest challenges of mankind in the next 50, 100 years. So I think it's really useful to find a raison d'être, to use the French word. And it's a way to motivate people to wake up every day and go to work. So it's a no-brainer that climate change is a source of motivation for all team members. The second one would be related to diversity. So it's something that is related also to the fact that we are working with multinationals in many different countries. So today we are actually 22 in the company, and we should be somewhere around 50 people by the end of next year. And we already have people coming from more than 10 different countries. We have someone coming from Togo, someone coming from Tunisia, someone coming from Italy, Austria, Liechtenstein. So we want to make sure that the company will be global from let's say the first year onwards, and that we have a global mindset. So we're able to work in different languages and to be able to work in different countries, understand the different cultures. So it is something which is quite unusual for a startup. As a startup, you tend to start first in your home country, and then maybe after 3, 4, 5 years, you export your model to other countries. In our case, as we are working with governments and multinationals, we had to be international from day one. And in terms of the profiles that we recruit, it's something which is very crucial.
And how have you found that, hugely diverse working team how have you found they react to values? Is it ultimately a universal set of values that you can find that anybody can react to, be it, about sustainability, be it about resilience, humility, integrity? How have you found that even with all of these diverse people?
I think we have some universal values. For example, grit is one of them, because we need, of course, to be very responsive as a startup. We compete against very well-established brands. We compete against large corporations, so we need to be better than them on everything we do to compensate for the lack of brand power. And grit is something that you can find everywhere in the world. You can find people with a good fighting spirit, of course, in the US, in Latin America, in Asia. So it's something that could be quite universal. In terms of, I would say, interests around climate change, I think it's also becoming, I would say, a worldwide thesis. There is no country not feeling the impact of climate change on their economy, be it agriculture, tourism, or whatever. Some of them are more exposed. Typically, people in North Africa can really feel the impact of droughts on their GDP. So it's very obvious. For some countries, they are a bit luckier, and they can basically they are a bit more protected against natural catastrophes. But I think it's something that everybody feels concerned about. So this is something that we can really use as a way to both motivate people and integrate them into the team.
I think it's actually a really important thing that you've identified values as a tool for attracting great staff, but also that you've identified values as a way of bridging cultural gaps. Because I think too often organizations forget how values can be so universal across nations, across gender, across personality types. And when businesses have a set of values that they truly live and believe in, be that around resilience, integrity, humility, grit, then what they actually do is they create a universal set of language that anybody, anywhere in their organization, and even their customers can identify with. So sort of just picking up one of the points that you mentioned earlier, why is grit specifically one of the values that you appreciate?
I think we are living in a world which may become more complex. Populism is growing in many countries. There are, let's say, plenty of new sources of instability in the world. So you need to have a mindset that will give you the ability to bounce back, to basically learn from your failures. You need probably to be much more, I would say, optimistic and resilient today than, let's say, 40 or 50 years ago. Of course, during the World War II or World War I, the situation was much more challenging. So I don't want to compare our situation today with what our grandfathers had to go through. But I still think that compared to the 80s, the society is probably a bit more under pressure. COVID-19 creates anxiety worldwide, so we need to take actions. We should not, I would say, give up and accept the current situation. We need to find solutions to our problems, and we are looking for such people being able to find solutions and to be able to fight back despite everything that may happen. That's something quite it's crucial for the company.
I think of grit. I would call it resilience in my values language. That resilience or grit is ultimately the reaction to failure, an ability to go again. And I personally feel that links very closely with learning. And what is unique, I suppose, about this space in time that you've highlighted is that change of technology, this need to adapt as modern economies, to be able to take a whole new way of working, a whole new set of mental models, and adapt those to fit the new circumstances requires learning. And to learn, you're going to fail. To learn, it's going to be difficult. You're going to have to objectively change the way that you see the world and you think. And that requires just a lot of fortitude, a lot of resilience, a lot of grit. So, in your space, specifically in Descartes, which is at the sort of the forefront of parametric solutions for weather-based NatCat, how much learning are you doing? Are you still having to tackle a lot of problems that you don't know the answers for?
Yes, definitely on a daily basis. The reason is that I would say we are just at the beginning of a new data revolution. So there are plenty of new data sources coming from satellites, coming from the Internet of Things. So there are plenty of things that haven't been used before in terms of just of data. In addition, people talk a lot about artificial intelligence. And today it's really about machine learning and to some extent about neural networks. But the way data are managed is improving on a daily basis. So there are new techniques, new ways to improve our understanding of data. So we are definitely learning every day. This is something that may not change for it may be the case for the next 20 years. So I don't see any big drop in new data sources or new AI techniques or I mean, say quantum computing could be also a big next step for data science. So I'm very optimistic about all the new things we may learn in the next years.
I'd love to explore a bit about neural networks and AI and the areas that you've just outlined as new areas of growth and opportunity. But could you just connect for the listeners, first of all, about what Descartes' sort of day-to-day work is, and then how you would use these types of technologies in your work?
Cool. So if we take just one example, wildfire or bushfire for Australia. So no surprise, there is a sharp increase in wildfires worldwide, be it in Chile, the US. So we saw the situation in California and Oregon, in Australia, but it's also the case in Sweden, in Europe. So definitely it's a growing risk. The way traditional insurers tend to protect, for example, timber companies against wildfires is not fit for purpose. So usually you have to send loss adjusters on the ground. They try to assess the burnt areas, and usually they apply deductibles per wildfire. So in the case of Australia or even the US, there could be litigations for 5-10 years, because fires could merge, and then there would be a fight between lawyers to determine how many fires were actually insured. For example, you may have a 50 million deductible per fire. If you say there were 5 fires or 10 fires or just one, the potential claim payments would be very different. In our case, what we do is we use different satellites. It could be European satellites, so launched by the European Space Agency. We are actually incubated by the European Space Agency. It could be American satellites. It could be Chinese, Japanese satellites, typically from the JAXA. We basically, if you take the European Space Agency, it would be Sentinel satellites. So it's a family of satellites that have been launched over the last 5 years, and some more will be launched in the next years. Such satellites are able, for example, to determine if an area has been burnt or not. And it will be much more precise than, I would say, through loss adjusters on the ground. And what we insure in that case is not the fire, it's just the total surface. So there won't be any debate about there were 3 fires, 2, 5, 10. We don't care. We just look at the plantation. We have our own algorithms to get rid, for example, of roads, rivers, natural forests. And so to be able to only insure the plantation of our clients. And then after a wildfire, we know exactly how much should be given basically to our clients to be able to bounce back and to keep on growing their business. So it's a completely different technology and approach towards insurance.
So I understand, how does AI affect in that? Is it sort of the AI or the neural network being placed above that analysis, or sort of doing sort of historic analysis based on previous satellite imagery? And how does that work?
So we're talking about, for example, plantations above 10 million hectares. So it's very large, and you need to be able to identify. You need some algorithms to recognize, for example, roads, rivers, natural forests. This is not something that you can do on your own. So you need an algorithm to be able to detect what has to be covered and what should not be covered, and at the same time, if the tree is burnt or not. So for that, you need basically to use a combination of machine learning and neural networks to be able to basically detect almost in real time if there is a wildfire. When I say almost in real time, it could be a couple of hours and sometimes a couple of days if it's a very complex topic, and it depends also on the geography. But it's through such algorithms that you'll be able to offer such a product. Otherwise, you will need to go through local measurements, people sent on the ground to again review the damage, which is not our approach. We really prefer to use data because it's more powerful in many cases. It will be more precise, and it will help us process swift claim payments, which is crucial also for our clients.
But how does it help your customer? How does this type of approach help the people that need the cash at the time?
Typically, we commit ourselves to process the claim payment within 5 working days. In the corporate segment, and we are really focused on corporate players, usually it's above 6 to 12 months, because there will be some, when there is a claim in the corporate segment, usually the insurer will try to find a way to minimize the loss for them, and the insured will probably contact their lawyers to make sure that they will get the most out of the insurance policy. So it's a very conflictual world, and it takes lots of time to get a claim payment. We want to get rid of that. We want to get rid of litigations, and we want to make sure that our clients will get money very quickly after the loss. Typically, it's the case for cyclones. So for cyclones, we're able to monitor the height of the cyclone. If it crosses a circle close to our clients, we will be able to basically trigger a claim payment. In some cases, due to local regulations, we will have to receive a declaration of loss from our clients, because in some countries, like for example France, you cannot force the client to be paid. So you have to request your client to send you something to be able to process the payment. Well, the rationale is that sometimes you have some bonuses or maluses that could be impacted by a claim payment. That's why you cannot force your client to get a payment. But it's something.
I was going to ask that. I was going to wonder why you wouldn't want to get paid. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's because they fear a large price increase afterwards. It's also one of the reasons, which is not a good one. But it's true that when you have a claim, you can, as an insured, if after the claim payment, you can expect either your insurer to cancel the policy or to ask for a very strong price increase, which is, for me, not a good approach. We are talking a lot about customer centricity in the insurance world, but if your client suffers a loss, the next step is not to send a policy cancellation. Otherwise, you're not doing your job properly. So and it means also that you are not able to assess the risk properly upfront, because the risk is not changing from one day to another.
Yeah, I find this an interesting consideration, actually, because this is the opportunity with someone like Descartes, where you have a more granularized access to risk information that you can hopefully assess risk in a new and more effective way. And then, like you've said, the situation comes where you've got to make a claim, and then you have then what next? Are you then you're lumbered with this situation where you can't get insurance again? But with proper analysis, you would be able to assess that risk in a way that makes it appealing for the customer to buy again, and also then to have coverage. I wonder what you think about the idea of sort of this fractionalization, this opening up of insurance and to insurance capacity, specifically to the capital markets, because it strikes me that the types of risks that we're talking about are the magnitude of potential loss is, ginormous, and the reinsurance market, with its maybe 50 odd billion capacity, just isn't capable of covering the potential future risks that society faces. So what are your thoughts on fractionalizing insurance and opening it up, say, to the capital markets, and by providing much better data?
So I think there are actually two questions. I will start with my view on ILS, so the insurance-linked securities market. I think if we take a step back, it was initially fueled by low interest rates. So asset managers were pouring lots of capital in the insurance market because definitely the interest rates were low, and they were looking for a decrease in their beta. So basically, they were looking for decorrelation in their portfolio. And it's true, there is almost no impact of a large net cat on stock markets. You may have a big hurricane in Miami, an earthquake in Japan, and you will see that the impact on NASDAQ or FTSE or whatever will be very limited. So that was the rationale for large asset managers to enter into the insurance and reinsurance markets. But I think for us, it's a great opportunity. As you said, the challenge is so big. I mentioned the fact that uninsured losses were growing faster than insured losses. So we need to find more capacity in the world, and financial markets could be part of the solutions. And if you look at most of the large insurers or reinsurers, they are all having their own ILS fund to be able to provide additional capacity, typically for earthquake and cyclones. I think that is not, I would say, it's not it's not always a competitor to insurers. Insurers are also partnering a lot with alternative capital. Coming back to your other question on, I would say, the fact that insurance could be fractioned. I don't know if you mean by that the fact that mutualization is something that could be compromised in the long term by new algorithms and the ability to be much more accurate in terms of pricing. Is it what you had in mind when you?
Yeah, well, what I meant by it is that say you're faced with you're Mr. Elon Musk, and you have a gigafactory in a location and the potential coverage for that gigafactory runs into the hundreds of millions in terms of its potential impact on your business. the resulting premium is such that it's maybe difficult to take, or the capacity in the market is such that it's not prepared to cover it. Fractionalizing, taking individual elements of that risk and being able to offer it out in this way, and by having these types of granular risk assessments that we've just talked about, is a way to fractionalize this, and make it available, these types of risk, as part of a non-correlated portfolio, as you've mentioned. I see that as a potential personally, and I'm just wondering about you for the same, but and particularly making the types of profile of risk understandable, clearly articulated, so that investors, private investors, can start to make a call and take a position on that risk.
I think as long as the risk is decorrelated from the performance of stock markets, there is a strong appetite from asset managers to be, I would say, very active in that space. You mentioned, for example, Tesla. I think a recent example is with Google. So I think Google announced, I think last week or earlier this week, that they will actually issue a cat bond. Usually for capacities below $500 million, I would say the reinsurance market is strong enough to do it. When it goes above that, it's true that cat bonds or other vehicles could be leveraged. And I think it's a long-term trend. So I don't see ILS funds withdraw from the natural catastrophe space in the next years, even if the interest rates may go up in 5 or 10 years. I think they are here to stay. And I think for both insurers, reinsurers, and the end clients, it's good news. I think again it's additional capacity, and their mandate is also changing a lot right now. So initially, ILS funds were really focused on 3 types of risks. So basically, they were focusing on earthquake in Japan, cyclones in the Caribbean and Florida, and earthquake in California. Right now, we observe more and more ILS funds trying to, for example, take a share of the wildfire market, to be more involved in drought risks in Africa or Eastern Europe. So we see that their mandate is not as narrow as before. So definitely there is a growing appetite for new products, and I think it's related to the fact that they're able to better assess the risk through new data sources, and also the correlations between the different risks. The big challenge will be pandemics, because for pandemics there is a strong correlation with stock market performance. So basically, there is no appetite for them to add some accumulation to their existing portfolio. That's why governments will be forced to be more involved than in other assets.
Yeah, this is an interesting point about accumulation, and was covered in a previous podcast with I've done with others like Patrick Callahan and others who are trying to tackle this very problem. Accumulation seems to be one of the Achilles heels of the idea of covering pandemic risks. Tell me about what's next for Descartes then. For those interested in your progress, what's upcoming?
So we want to keep on growing very fast, and so we have opened a hub in New York recently. We saw our first employee joining us in a few days. We're also opening an office in Singapore, and I think in a few years we have several hubs beyond Singapore and New York to be able to be closer to our brokers and end customers. I think we are a great place for mathematicians and people having a passion for data. So I think we managed to attract high calibers, and the challenge we have are huge. So they can really enjoy, I would say, working with us every day because they will be using the latest methods, the latest technologies. So I think it's definitely for actuaries and modelers, it's a great place to work. I mentioned the fact that we really want Descartes Underwriting to be multicultural. So we don't need to speak French, for example, if you join our Paris office. So we have plenty of people so not being able to say anything in French, and it's fine. So I know that it's not the case for many firms in France. So we have a big advantage because we can really recruit people just being interested in the field, in the space, and not I would say having any specific language skills. Yeah, I think that's a good summary of why people should join us.
Excellent. So I hear from that sort of there's some key expansion going on for you into other territories. What are those other geographies that you're most excited about at Descartes right now?
Well, I think LATAM is definitely a geography where we are growing very fast. So we today we have only one Mexican in the team, and I think we will have more Spanish speakers very soon. Asia is definitely where innovation is happening. So of course you have lots of innovation in the US, but I would say that China is by far the most innovative country in the world for insurance. I would say most of the most innovative companies actually in China, again in the insurance sector. We need to be more active in China at some point in time. We are already quite active in Taiwan on the Asian side, so we just need to keep on growing in that region. Australia is also a very promising market, and unfortunately, it's also a country very vulnerable to climate change, both due to an increase in temperature. So typically, bushfire is a big topic in Australia at the moment, but also cyclones, both on the east coast and the west coast. So droughts for agriculture is also a key topic. So Australia is definitely on our radar, but more for the next probably in 12 months. We need to make sure that New York is up to speed, same for Singapore, and then we can start working on other geographies.
Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I can hear there's some big markets for you to expand into there. And with those, I can hear there's some big challenges I can imagine in the Australian markets, LATAM markets, and these emerging markets as well. This need to provide the types of weather-based natural catastrophe coverage. So I wish you the best of luck in getting into those. As we sort of finish up, I'd just like to ask a couple of questions about sort of your own experience about being an entrepreneur. And so what was the most unexpected element for you of being and becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, I think the job really forces you to be present and intentional with how you spend your time. So it can be easy to have your mental bandwidth with, let's say, your with the problem of the day, and also paying wages every month. But it's really important to be just as intentional in building your team and functions for the long term. So I think it's the big challenge is to be able to find a compromise between the short-term challenges and the long-term challenges. So I'm trying to spend more and more time on what Descartes will become in 2 or 3 years, rather than what we need to achieve by the end of the month. And I think it's not that easy, actually.
So what tools are you using to be more intentional?
Well, I think I have to delegate more and more, and right now we have a larger team, so it's easier. And I need to accept basically to have probably lower revenues in the very short term if I can generate much larger revenues in 1 or 2 years' time, which means that we are spending more time on R&D. We are spending more time on things that will only deliver value in the middle term. And it means that also you need to convince your, let's say, your shareholders to share the same vision and to work on this vision, and not only on I would say the monthly management report, which is the case for some startups, and also for large groups. I spent 8 years within a very large insurer, and it's very difficult to think long term, because you have to meet your daily targets, your monthly targets, and it's difficult to find time to build something for 2022 or 2025. That's a challenge.
So I hear in that answer that being an entrepreneur, the unexpected component is that you're being pulled in both directions, delivering short-term objectives versus also building for the long term, and learning how to be very intentional about delegating your time between those two types of objectives, and then giving responsibility away to others as well, right? And letting them help you in.
Yes, we have new joiners every 2 to 3 weeks right now, so we need to trust them. So they do not have sometimes previous expertise in the insurance space, but we need to train them as fast as we can to be able to delegate more and to create a second, third, fourth generation of employees that will share the same mindset, and we'll be able to free up time for the first generation to really focus on how to create a multinational based out of a startup, which is definitely achievable but challenging.
Well, I wish you the very best in that success and achieving that goal. So, Tanguy, I really appreciated your time today. Thank you very much. As we finish up, I always like to ask this question. What are the top 3 books that have influenced your thinking? And that could be something right now, or ones you loved as a kid, and can be fiction, it can be business, anything you like.
Well, I think the first one is a book from Rene Descartes. So the French mathematician and philosopher. Is called the Discourse on the Method. So basically, it's a book where René Descartes uses the famous expression cogito ergo sum, which means basically I think, therefore I exist. And I think in this book, Descartes tackles the problem of skepticism, and he starts his line of reasoning by doubting everything. So to assess the world from a fresh perspective, clear of any, I would say, cliché or preconceived notions. So I think it's as a startup, you need to break some rules, and to also you need, of course, to learn from large companies and the way they work. At the same time, you need to differentiate yourselves and to be able to challenge challenge the status quo. And I think the scientific method of Descartes is very powerful, of course, for scientists, but also for entrepreneurs, because they will need at some point in time to break some existing rules, to get rid of some conventions that had a meaning 50 years ago or a century ago, but the meaning has been completely lost. So I think that's the first book. The second book would be the Innovators Dilemma from Christensen. I think it gives you the reason why some large companies are failing, and it gives you also some hope as a startup to do much better with less resources than very large groups. So I think it's.
Can you repeat the name of that book for me, please?
It's the Innovators Dilemma.
Innovators Dilemma.
Yeah, exactly. From Clayton Christensen. And the last one is a book wrote by Stephen Catlin, so one of the key characters in the insurance industry. And I think there is a nice quote from him in his book, saying that insurers do not respond to the claimant with a smile, a handshake and a check, basically when there is a claim. And that insurers are frequently adversarial. And I think it's it's a good summary of the relationship between insurers and insureds. And I think that right now it's not acceptable anymore. So we need to find a more collaborative way to work with our clients. I don't want to talk about customer centricity because it's something that has been used a lot by large insurers, but I think it's not materializing very well in the way they handle claims. So we want within Descartes Underwriting to completely change the mindset. We really want to be able to have this smile and this handshake when there is a claim, and we want to be helpful and responsive because we know that we will build a very strong reputation out of it, and that basically the level of loyalty will increase a lot, and that we will be able to be a very differentiated animal in the corporate sector if we manage to do that. So it's really something that is key in the way we want to behave with our partners.
Fantastic. And what was the name of the book?
It's Risk and Reward.
Risk and Reward. Okay, great. I'll put a link in the show notes to all of those books. That's fantastic, and it's great to know, the Descartes reference there as well, because I think many people were wondering that was why the company was called that, and I think it was a lovely connection. Thank you very much, Tanguy. You've been an absolute pleasure talking to. It's been great hearing about, your view of the market, the progress of Descartes Underwriting, and what you have on the horizon as well. So thank you again, and I wish you the very best.
Thank you very much, William. Talk to you soon.